Chris, it'd be awesome to get started with a little bit of your personal journey into the world of veganism. What's kind of brought you here?
I'm kind of one of those people who's had a journey that's been so many years in the making. I started off really going steering away from like red meat and pork and really focusing on just eating chicken and fish. And that was really because I was having a weight concern at the time. And one of the things that the doctor recommended to me was just kind of starting to get away from eating the red meats and stuff like that. And so I was like, yeah, great, I'll do it. And I was really young at the time. I was maybe in the seventh or eighth grade. And so from that point on, I never really ate beef or pork anymore. And was pretty much just a chicken and fish eater. And then I would continue on that journey for maybe the next 10 years and then, drop chicken and just go pescatarian. And I finally went vegetarian. But, I'm a chef and I'm a baker, excuse me. And one of the things being a baker is the dairy aspect. And so I was holding on to this. I was holding on to kind of this preconceived notion that I had to be able to bake with butter and I had to use eggs and heavy cream and all of those things that you typically associate with baking. And it really wasn't until I watched the documentary What the Health that I was like, wait a second, I just have to figure out how to do it different. Because this isn't something that I can continue doing from an ethical standpoint, from just a health standpoint, from a global standpoint. When you think of what's going on with the environment and what they do to get these products to the consumer, so it was from that. It was from watching What the Health, and then, of course, years later, Seaspiracy comes out, and I'm like, oh my God, like I was a pescatarian thinking I was doing the right thing for so long, and here we are seeing Seaspiracy. So it was a very long journey for me to get all the way to veganism, but I can't see myself ever going back at this point.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing that you sort of began so young and that these seeds were sown then and then sort of just gradually kind of like bloomed over the course of time. I'm intrigued as to when the baking started. So was that equally as young, or was that a passion that you discovered later?
I was really fortunate to have been like kind of birthed into a culinary family. My grandparents on one side owned a restaurant, and it was very like Southern style. I'm from Florida originally, and my grandparents had a restaurant in North Georgia. And so every summer I would go up there and spend the summers with them and be in the kitchen working and kind of just, just soaking up everything that I could in the kitchen because it was something that I was really interested in. But on the flip side, my other grandma, she was an avid baker. And so she would come and spend the holidays with us, and no other grandkid actually had any type of interest of being in the kitchen other than me. And so I was just right there on, the kitchen chair next to her so I could reach the countertop. And that was from a really, really young age, probably, since I was like 5, just in the kitchen, working next to her every holiday. And she actually passed away of lung cancer when I was just 12 years old. But by that time, I knew all of her recipes. And so I took over like all of the baking for the holidays at the young age of like 12. So, it's something I've been doing basically my whole life, and it's just kind of part of my DNA.
That's incredible. So it's like a real labor of love for you. Like the connection is deep.
Yeah, it really is. Like it's funny because I tell my husband sometimes, I'm like, I really can sometimes feel my grandma like working through a recipe with me. And it sounds really weird to people at times, but I almost can hear her like telling me just slow down. Like it takes the time that it takes to develop a recipe, or, for bread to proof, or, whatever the case may be. I sometimes can just hear her in the kitchen with me, like guiding me through recipes if I'm having like a stressful situation.
That's incredible. Yeah, and it
Yeah.
just I've had a few conversations recently with folks, and this has come up a few times recently about how deep our emotional connections are with food. On that note, actually, and you talk about this kind of southern cuisine being your kind of upbringing as well. As a naive British person, tell us a little bit about that. What's kind of the traditional kind of southern cooking that you grew up with entails?
Yeah, I mean, Southern food is typically like really, it's typically really really heavy. It's really comforting. It's typically a lot of fried food. So it's fried chicken, it's collard greens, it's cornbread, it's macaroni and cheese, it's corn casserole, it's peach cobbler. And that's all stuff that my grandparents used to have like on their buffet. But
Yeah.
they also did like really cool stuff. Like if you were to go to their restaurant on Thanksgiving, um, they would serve the entire Thanksgiving dinner to your table, and you got to take like the rest of your turkey home with you. So like they would serve
Wow.
whole turkeys to your table, and it was just like a really special time of year because everybody could go and enjoy. And if you're not somebody who enjoys cooking, Thanksgiving is a really tedious holiday to prepare for your family.
Yeah.
And to be able to go to like their restaurant and really be able to sit down and enjoy this home cooked meal, but not have to do any of the labor and then still have the leftovers, was a really special thing for the community the restaurant was in.
Yeah, I bet. I bet. It feels like it was kind of really at the heart, doing something very special as well. I mean, that was, obviously our standpoint now in terms of the content of the meal. We've probably got a different view now to what we would have had back then. But still, this notion of like this community restaurant offering this incredibly unique service is quite staggering in itself. Really incredible.
Yeah.
Thinking about your moving it forward, thinking about that upbringing then. So you've got this kind of like shining example of this community based kind of professional restaurant on one side. You've got this amazing emotional connections with baking and so on. Was that do you think it was kind of almost kind of a destined point that you'd make these two worlds collide, if you like, and that would be your kind of profession? And was there a moment that you particularly knew this is what my calling is, if you like?
Well, one would think that like the way, like if you were to have watched me from like a fly on the wall perspective, as I was growing up, and as like my skills were developing as I got older and was experimenting more in the kitchen, one would have just thought that, this guy's going to go to culinary school and, be a chef. Cut to, I moved to Los Angeles to go to hair school.
Okay.
So I did that, and I was a hairstylist out here in LA for about 10 years. And, it was one of those things. Again, along the way, I was still baking. I still had, a little baking Instagram, and I was putting up everything that I was creating in the kitchen. I was putting up and doing my hashtags and all of that fun stuff. But, it wasn't what I was doing for my career at the time. And I would say that I quickly learned that hair wasn't my true passion, but I stayed with it because I had invested in the schooling. And so I got an opportunity to go on the Great American Baking Show, and that was probably the time where I was like, okay, the hair industry has ran its course, and we're gonna leave that as a portion of life and move on from here. So, when I got the opportunity to go on the show, I decided that when I came back from shooting, I wouldn't go back to doing hair anymore because
Right.
this was going to afford me a jumping off point for the next portion of my life.
Wow. I know a couple of people who've applied to go on like the British version over
Yeah.
here. And the story that I've heard from those folks, and I've probably been one of their friends and family doing this, has always been their friends and family saying, "You have to go on that show. Like, why don't you apply? This is like it's clearly your thing." Was there a group, friends, family, your husband saying to you, you need to get on this show"?
It was my husband. So my husband is actually in the entertainment industry, and he started his career in casting. He's now a producer, but he started in casting, and one of his old casting mates reached out to him and said, "Hey, I follow your husband on Instagram, and he looks like he would do really well. I'm casting the Great American Baking Show right now." And so he came home from work that day and he's like, so I got this message today and I really think you should give it a go. And again, I was a fan of the show. We had watched every season of the British version that was available here in the States. We, watched all of the American version. And I was like, yeah, why not? Like, why not go for it and see what happens? If I don't get on, I don't get on, but I should at least try. And it's one of those just the process of auditioning for a show like that. It's so grueling that I think it in itself makes you a stronger baker. It makes you it makes you like a better, more, I would say it makes you more confident in yourself just by auditioning for the show. But yeah, I got on.
That's amazing. Like, what's that process like then? The you mentioned it being I can imagine. Well, I can only imagine because I'm certainly I dabble in a bit of baking, but I'm just nowhere near your standard. Like those kind of auditions. Is it? I'm imagining. Is it like the show, almost like dress rehearsal after dress rehearsal? Of like, can you do this under pressure?
Yeah. So it starts off by you do kind of like a casting interview, kind of like what we're doing right now. Like it's just a Zoom call with a casting director. And then after that, you submit another video for the network. And then you have to do like this 100-question interview. And then after that, you're actually invited to an in-person where you have to bring 3 different bakes. 2 of them are your own, your whatever you'd like. And then the third one is actually a recipe that they give you, but they don't give you the directions for it. So it's basically like, here's the ingredients, it's bread, but how is that bread going to come out? Is it going to be a country loaf? Is it going to be, a rustic loaf? Like, how are you going to present it to the judging panel? I will say that everybody's looked a little bit different who I was there with at the time, and I got it all wrong. Mine was definitely incorrect. But yeah, it was after that round of meeting with the judges or the judging panel, it was like the culinary producer of the show and then a couple other people. After that, you got a call back to come in and do like a mock bake-off where you were in a kitchen at a culinary school and there were cameras, there were field producers, they were coming around asking you questions and you were baking and they were kind of seeing how you would be on camera and how you could do with the distraction of, other people around you, not having the directions to the cake you were making, seeing how you acted under that pressure.
I can't believe that. The pressure. I just couldn't even begin to cope with that. How did you feel? Had you been through anything like that before? Was this kind of like completely unique?
Never. This was my very first time on camera. It was, I moved out to LA to be a hairstylist. I didn't move out here to be, an actor or be in front of the camera. I never, it was just never in my purview. And so to have that experience it was interesting. And then to go and actually be on the show, I learned that I actually enjoyed it. Like I didn't really get nervous by it. I got really excited by it. And, it showed me a different side of me that I really didn't know was there.
Yeah. I bet I imagine under that level of pressure, probably anyone would discover all kinds of stuff about themselves they didn't know.
Yeah. Oh, there was breakdowns and meltdowns, and it was a really interesting time.
Yeah. I can only imagine. The thing that would I mean, a lot of it would scare me, but one of the things that would particularly scare me is the technical challenges, like you say, where you have you're going to make this and you don't really know what the instructions are or how to do it or anything, and there's always that, I imagine there's a lot of editing obviously that goes down to the hour's show, but there's always that moment where all the contestants are kind of like panicked looks, almost like glances at each other's stations, and like, what are you doing it like I'm doing it, and all that kind of stuff. Like, was it exactly like that? Did you find yourself in a lot of those situations? How did you come through those?
That was exactly like it was. I mean, when you're there and when you're doing those technicals and you expose the ingredients and you expose like all of your vulnerabilities, you have to remember everybody is just a home baker. It's no professionals on this show at this point. And to expect that anybody in that tent has created or baked all of the things that are going to come under these technical challenges, it's probably not going to happen. So like for me, I had never made Florentines before, but you kind of just go with your gut, and you kind of just, you look around, you give a glance to see everybody's getting their pots out and starting on the stovetop. I'm going to go with that. So that means, and then you look back to your ingredients and say, okay, so they must be making a caramel. I'm going to go with that. I'm going to make a caramel. And you kind of just go with your gut and put one foot in front of the other. That was the most nerve-wracking, was those technical challenges. Somehow I did well on all of them. I did well. So maybe my grandma was with me on all of those. I don't know.
So. I think so. Was there any, because and forgive me, it's difficult to get hold of the show, the US version, over in the UK. So I haven't had a chance to watch your particular series, although I'm going to try and seek out a way that's not too illegal to do that, because I'm a big fan of the show myself. In terms of like, there's always a controversial moment. There's always some folks who've had a disastrous week, and everyone kind of feels for them. It sounds like you had some amazing success with with some of those technical challenges. Was there any moments, those like heart-stopping ones, where you were kind of looking around thinking, oh my God, I feel so sorry for that person over there right now?
Not off the top of my head, to be honest with you. I can't recall. I felt pretty myself, actually.
Really?
There was one challenge, and I was making eclairs, and the dough just wasn't coming out, and I had to remake the dough like 4 times, and I just didn't think that I was ever going to finish the actual challenge, and I did, and I think that I actually got Star Baker that week, which was
wow.
One of the, it was like one of those things. And of course, the way, like you were saying earlier, the way they edit the whole hour episode, I just looked like this frantic maniac trying to get these eclairs on the table. And then I, of course, ended up getting Star Baker, I think.
Oh,
So,
I mean, kudos to you. That's pretty incredible.
oh, thank you.
The star getting the Star Baker is a coveted prize. So to do that when you thought it had gone wrong.
Yeah,
is,
exactly.
oh dear, it's amazing. At this point, you were vegan, right? Or were you kind of in the process? Just talk me through the timeline there.
At that point, I was vegetarian.
Okay, so you were kind of still like, this is the way you have to bake, like,
Right.
yeah, and so going through the show, at what point, you said you watched What the Health, you came out of the show and thought, do you know what, this is going to be my career. Was there a point where you then thought, okay, and not only is this going to be my career, but I want to go down this route too with my business?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as I made that change, for like my household, I knew that as a business, I had to make that change as well. Like if I was going to not be putting these things in my body, going back to an ethical standpoint, I didn't think it was right to sell these things to a consumer. And so, or again, like I don't think it's ethically right to purchase these things.
Yeah.
So if I'm not purchasing them for my house, how can I purchase them for my business? So it kind of just all just fell into place. And from a consumer standpoint, there's not a lot in the marketplace for allergy conscious baking, which is what we consider ourselves. We consider ourselves allergy conscious baking. So, vegan and gluten free is primarily what we put out, and there's just not a ton that is on the market for it. So it's nice to be able to fill a little bit of a void when that wasn't necessarily what we were looking to do. We were just looking to follow our ethos.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely want to come on to the allergy point as well, because there's a couple of previous guests I've had, and there's one in particular who's a kind of consultant in the food safety field and has written a book about this, and really talks about how, to your point, there is a woeful lack of serious consideration put into allergens, and this is a kind of a growing thing. People are becoming more aware, but I think becoming more aware from an inclusivity point of view, that you've got folks who suffer incredibly, can't eat out, can't buy these sorts of things, and they're almost just forgotten about, not catered for. So it's amazing. I absolutely want to come on to that. Before we do though, just from the switching the business, an incredibly bold decision, I think, to come out of this, decide to this is the route I want to take ethically. I'm going to make not only a business but a new business, and I'm going to make it focused on veganism and so on. Given your background, given how long you've been baking, and like you said, in your mind it was heavy creams, it was butters, it was the whole eggs. What was that process like of relearning almost? Like, where did you even start? Because I could imagine that would have been incredibly difficult for someone who's got so much accumulated knowledge in the kind of like the traditional methodology of baking.
It was for me, being a full vegan chef and taking more of a, I guess, taking more of a liking to the baking realm. I think what's more exciting to me about baking is just the science behind it and what goes into the whole process of putting together a recipe. And I think when I took everything vegan, it was really fun for me to be able to figure out what works in my recipes that I currently had in my arsenal. How do I make them vegan but taste exactly the same? Because my whole thing is, I don't want someone to ever taste a product that I put out and say, this tastes healthy, this tastes vegan, this tastes gluten-free. Like, I never want anyone to know that it's anything different other than delicious. And so for me, it was challenging because, there's so many different ways that you can swap in eggs for a recipe. You can use tofu, you can use flaxseed, you can use aquafaba, you can use just egg. Like, you can use so many different things when you're substituting in eggs. But again, there's a million different milks on the market. Do you want a higher concentrate of fat and you're using coconut cream? Like, it really just because recipes are all about ratios, it's really just trying not to mess with your fat ratios in the recipe. And just you have to dive into the science of the recipe in order to keep it the same. But I don't think there's anything out there that you can't make vegan and make it taste delicious. You just have to really look at the core of the recipe and figure out the best substitutions. Because sometimes I find that adding silken tofu is the best thing to add for a certain recipe, but it definitely doesn't work for other recipes. So it's a lot of trial and error, much more than working with regular stuff. But now that I've been doing it for a while, it's coming more natural, and it's kind of just the way I do things now, opposed to when I first started. So yeah, it's good. It's good.
Has it been sort of almost helped, kind of, not that you necessarily fallen out of love with it at all, it's completely a passion, but has it kind of like almost reignited some excitement in the, cause it's almost like relearning, like the way you describe it, like I've got to try, this might not work with this, it worked brilliantly in that last recipe, but it doesn't work with it. Like, I imagine that's quite scary whilst running a business, but also exciting, like this new challenge.
Yeah, it is really exciting to me. I have a massive problem with like food waste. So for me, I do a lot of research. I do a lot of like development on the back end before I even go into the kitchen, because I just can't. Like, nothing goes in the garbage. So if it doesn't come out, how can I fix it so we can at least eat it at home? When I'm recipe testing. So I think it definitely has made it feel new again. It's made the whole process feel refreshing in some weird way. Like, it feels like every time I make a cake, I'm not killing a ton of animals. So it's like, I'm not doing any harm. Like, this is kind of nice. And I'm getting, all of this protein from the different, of course there's a bunch of sugar. I'm not saying it's a health food, but I'm seeing like the different added benefits from using all plant-based ingredients.
Yeah, I bet. I imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, I imagine you made a real sort of friendship group or a community out of the folks that you were on the show with, and probably since then have probably developed a bigger community within the kind of the baking world and so on and so forth. Was there a bit of surprise, almost questioning, when you said, "Do you know what, I'm not only starting this business, but it's going to be vegan, and we're going to focus on allergens and supporting the folks with kind of allergen needs as well"? Was there a bit of shock there, and like, well, you can't do that, Chris, you can't cook vegan like the baking that you used to do?
Well, I will say, being in LA, it's a very widely accepted, everybody here has something they can't eat. Everybody in LA is on some kind of diet, everybody's keto or whatever. And then, veganism here is very widely, it's kind of like, if you say you're vegan, yeah, cool. Like, here's your separate menu. If you go to a restaurant that's not a vegan restaurant, they're like, oh, turn to the back page, there's your options. So I would say that we definitely live in a community that it's very widely accepted. One of the girls that I was on the Bake Off with, she has, I don't know how she does it, but her and her husband eat heard her husband and one of her kids have no dietary restrictions. Another one has is gluten intolerant, and another one is dairy intolerant. So she will cook basically 3 different meals every night for dinner. She's also open to bakery on the East Coast, and so she's great. She reaches out. She's like, "This is so great that you're doing this and that you're focusing on allergens," because she knows all about it. She knows what it's like to have to do that. And it's really interesting because people reach out and they're like, "What's a great swap in for eggs?" Or "What's a good cream cheese that you use as a dairy alternative?" Or so I do feel like it's been more support than anything else, which is always nice.
Yeah, definitely. Wonderful to hear that there's like you say. I think LA is one of those cities that's synonymous with being open to veganism and having this amazing community, and it's great to hear that that's sort of almost gone beyond that in terms of people reaching out and so on and so forth. Where did obviously you mentioned there that the LA and the fact that a lot of the folks around where you live, people you knew, kind of had allergy requirements. Was that the sort of the source of inspiration for making this focus in that area, or was there kind of more to it?
So my husband was actually having some stomach issues and really couldn't figure out what was going on, and so we went to the doctor, and she's like, "Yeah, your stomach's really inflamed. I want you to stop having gluten." And this is before we went vegan. And so he came home, and I'm like, "Are you kidding? Like, what am I going to do with all of these baked goods that I bake now? Who's going to eat them?" And so I switched over to gluten-free flour. I found a blend that I really like, and I started using that. And so I had already kind of made the switch to gluten-free baking. I switched all of the pasta that we used. I switched pretty much our entire house into a gluten-free environment. And when we went vegan, is when his stomach issues really subsided. And it actually had nothing to do with the gluten. So we now do eat some gluten on occasion, like we might have bread or whatever the case may be, but I still bake pretty much gluten free. And when we were when I was developing recipes for the company, I was just I was more conscious about what I was putting out because of the way that I had been developing my recipes based on what we eat in our house.
Yeah, I can imagine. Do you find that people are sorting you out for this specifically, and is the scale of it what you thought it would be, or have you been surprised by how much demand has come your way from that angle?
Yeah, I think first when I was first doing just the gluten-free stuff, it was a really interesting push of people. We have social media these days, which it's incredible to see when one person posts about something, the influx of orders that comes in, which is still blows my mind. So yeah, I would say this past year and a half, 2 years over the pandemic, however long the pandemic's been going on, it's been a blessing. I mean, there's definitely no complaints about the way things have been going, and we're just really grateful for how when a lot of businesses slowed down, ours kind of picked up because we had people reaching out to send gifts to people for their employees, just showing gratitude for working from home, and just different stuff like that. So it was a really nice way to be able to kind of take part in that as well. People just wishing happy birthday from a distance or what have you. So it was a really nice thing to to be involved with this year as everybody was kind of celebrating from a distance.
I was going to ask you about that. You know, as a business owner with a relatively new, growing fast business, something like the pandemic hits. Just to add a bit more complexity, you know, you're relearning, really a career. You've moved into a new career, a new style of cooking from the one that you'd grown up with, and then a pandemic hits as well. Like, I can't imagine again like what you would have dealt with as a business owner there. How did that feel? Did you feel like you had to kind of pivot from the original plan and move more into this kind of space of being able to ship out and make custom cakes and so on? Was that the original plan, or was it kind of you were rolling with the punches?
We were 100% rolling with the punches. Yeah, so before the pandemic hit, we were doing local coffee shops here in Los Angeles, and we were more of like a wholesale. And doing custom cakes, but not doing any delivery to like nationwide delivery or anything like that. We had none of that set up. And so when everything went into lockdown, we had to quickly figure out like what to do. And so we started doing quarantine drop-off menus. That was our first step. Right. So like the week after lockdown, we started doing these quarantine drop-off menus. They changed like every 2 or 3 weeks. We would post them on our Instagram, and they kind of just took off, and they went really, really well. And then we had people reaching out asking if we could ship them stuff, and the reply was, we don't have any shipping set up. And so we had to just quickly figure out like what's the cheapest way to ship things and the fastest, because it's perishable items. And so we quickly implemented nationwide shipping. And then fast forward to now, we do nationwide shipping, and we don't have the quarantine menus anymore, but we try to keep them, pretty change what we have on the website pretty often. Right now, we just have a few different cookie options because of, the summertime and shipping things in this hot weather. But, we have different boxes for Mother's Day and Father's Day and Easter and Christmas and Thanksgiving. So we try to change it with the season, and everything's always gluten-free and vegan. So it was really nice for people as well, because you also don't ever know what people's allergies are. And so to not have to think about that and be able to just send them a box and, with a little card inside that says whatever, and, know they're good to go.
It's wonderful as well to have built, going back to a point you made earlier, this level of trust with your customers, that they can come to a vegan, gluten-free baker, not knowing that the recipient, what needs that they may have, but knowing that you'll cover all, and them not feeling like I'm going to give them a product that isn't quite as good as the cake that we buy from X company. So right. Testament to the work that you've done to make a product that is, exceptional in quality, to the point where no one really, it sounds odd to say, but no one really minds whether it's vegan or not, sort of
right.
thing. That's not a problem.
Right. I mean, let's face it, we've all had something that you've taken a bite out of and you're like, it's gluten-free. Or you've taken a bite out of it and you're like, oh, this is vegan, or whatever the case may be. So, that's something that we really pride ourselves on. From the bakery to doing a full catered event, I don't ever want people to know they're having something that's vegan. And that's something that's really important to us, because if they're eating tofu, or if they're eating, a chickpea salad that's supposed to be tuna fish, I don't want people to know that what they're eating is plants. And that's kind of the bottom line. I think that as a chef, I have to do my part in making them feel like veganism is an approachable way of life, and that it can taste good, and that they can eat whatever they want. They just have to use their imagination.
On that note, you sort of almost feel, because I'm kind of getting this sense with it, that it's almost like it's your own form of activism in a way, you know, like,
Yeah.
is that too bold a statement to make? That's kind of how I sort of feel about it.
No, I think it's definitely something like that because you know we've all been asked like, well, what do you eat? Like everybody thinks that because you're a vegan, you only eat salad or you only eat lentils or you know there's all of these. But the fact of the matter is like the science within the food industry has developed, I would say, just in the last 5 years into something that I would have never imagined. And so what you can consume as a vegan is really phenomenal. And you don't even have to put that much work into it. You can buy all of these great products from your local market and prepare a meal just as you would if you weren't a vegan and have something that tastes incredible. So I think
get your view on something on this. So sorry, Chris.
No,
carry on.
go ahead.
No, I just wanted to get your view on something really, because I had a conversation a while back with a chef called Andy Hogben, who runs a fantastic restaurant in London called Alta, and they pride themselves on very similar to yourself in terms of an ethos, very different food, but in terms of our intention is not to be a good vegan restaurant. Our intention is to be a good restaurant,
right?
And it's irrelevant. We happen to be vegan. This is what we believe. These are our ethics. But it was incredibly important to Andy to stand on its own as exceptional and not just. He said the one thing I sort of dislike is when people say, "Oh, it's really you can almost not tell it's vegan," or you know those kind of statements that are like it's good for a vegan meal, you know. And he had an interesting take which I hadn't thought about until he said it, and I'd be interested to get your perspective. Was that in a way, us in the sort of vegan community had kind of not necessarily wrongly, but we kind of allow this too because we sort of buy into products that aren't as good and just because they're vegan, and we sort of buy into that rather than you know being selective, almost demanding a higher standard than we did before. And so he was kind of saying it's actually these, and he had a particular dislike of things like jackfruit burgers and stuff. I love a jackfruit burger personally, but he was talking about these things and kind of saying that they're almost like lazy. It's almost like this is like the vegan option that we sell, and it's kind of okay. And he was kind of saying that we in the vegan community we need to demand better. We need to do more things that are different. We need to make things that are exceptional in order to raise the bar properly and become on a par with kind of high quality mainstream food. So that's a very long rambling statement. Thought.
No,
I'd love to get your view on it.
I would have to agree. 100%. And I think that first off, I would beg people to ask the question if somebody says, well, this is, let's say, this is a great slice of chocolate cake for it being vegan. If they feel the need to throw that for being vegan in there, well, ask the question back. Well, have you had a better slice of chocolate cake? Because then it shifts the question on them and it takes it away from being vegan. So maybe it's that. Maybe it's more us asking more questions to them. Well, what would make it better in your opinion? Would you prefer the pasta to be more creamy? Would you, there needs to be more maybe of a dialogue, because again, the science in the food space is vast, and we can do anything that carnivores can do. Maybe it's just the feedback that we need. But I agree with him 100%. I think there is a lot of laziness, but there's also a lot that we can do. So I think it's about having more chefs like him that have the attention span and the willingness to do it. because once it is more mainstream, which it's on its way there. Again, like living in Los Angeles, you can't really go anywhere without having a vegan option. But once it is more mainstream, you know, it's not going to be an option to just have a shit burger on the menu and expect it to be an acceptable thing.
Yeah, that I think you're absolutely right. We're in that sort of crossover period where I think for many of us, depending on where we live, depending on the city we're in, we're sometimes just glad of being fed.
Right.
You know, and then there's that once when you get surrounded by these options, you then you then get the luxury of choice, and then you vote with your pounds or with your dollars to and the best will win out.
Yeah, exactly.
Just final sort of thought for you, Chris, or question is, where does it go from here in terms of the business? Because I just keep reflecting back on what you've done in this last year. You know, pivoted the business, started this brand new business, pivoted your cooking skill, learnt this whole new style, then developed a network where you could distribute products nationally across a country as vast as the States. It almost makes me think, what couldn't you do? So have you got more plans, or is there kind of a let's just see where we head at the moment?
Yeah, I'm kind of one of those people that I don't like to put parameters on the future, because I like to be open to possibility. Right now, we're working on an event in September that's going to be held in Detroit, which is going to be really cool. It's going to be a whole vegan Southern dinner. So we're going to have baked pimento cheese dip, and we're going to have fried chicken, collard greens, mac and cheese, corn casserole. There'll be banana pudding, chocolate peanut butter pie, which is, it's basically the whole dinner is a nod to my grandparents' restaurant back in Georgia. So these are all things that you would have been able to find on their menu. But I've veganized everything, and we're hosting a whole dinner at this place in Detroit called Frame. So we'll be there September 16th through the 19th. Tickets aren't on sale yet, but they will be. And yeah, I'm gonna hopefully be over in London sometime in October, November to do some fun things over there, and just doing more traveling now that I don't even want to say the words that COVID has let up, because we just don't know. But trying to get back out there, and now that I'm vaccinated, I'll say that. Now that the vaccine is there, but yeah, and just really seeing what the next step is, because I don't like to put limitations on things, because you never know what's going to happen.
Well, clearly, I don't think they could hold you in your creativity in. To be honest, you keep going in these amazing different directions. So I think fair enough for not putting parameters on it. Where could folks go to find out more, Chris?
Yeah, you can follow our Instagram at Betta with Butta, and then we will probably start posting events and stuff on our website as well, bettawithbutta.com. So those are the two best places. If you go to our website, you can go on to our email list and just subscribe to our newsletter. We never send anything out, so if we have events coming up, we'll shoot those out, but we're definitely not one of those people that are in your inbox every day.
You're not going to spam us.
No, never.
Wonderful. Chris, it's been amazing chatting with you. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it. The Instagram, I can absolutely, is mouth-watering. I could definitely recommend folks get on there, check it out, and the website. I can't wait to visit, and I hope some of those events like you've got planned in Detroit end up all over the place. I'd love to see one of those in London. So hopefully one day we'll see you over here soon.
We're working on it, Jim. Hey, thanks for having me today. I appreciate it.
I just drove around all night, 2:30 for 20. I had a radar hit, and it was going like 90 knots. And there was something there. It looked like it didn't look like a bird. It looked like them getting a rock to me.